Hi, folks. This is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report. I want to tell you about a method that I think is one of the most deadly methods of all of catching fish, especially largemouth bass, and that's using a Senko worm. Now, I'm saying Senko. That's a brand. That's a brand made by Yamamoto, and it's a popular brand because it's been proven successful. So you can use a worm and fish where there's largemouth bass and do well if you do it in the right manner. And I got to tell you about a day recently. My buddy Russ and I were fishing one of our area ponds, and we were using basically spinner baits and baits that we have used all summer long, and they're active baits, and we were doing okay. And Russ wanted to use a worm. But unless you fish a worm the way I think a worm would look natural to fish, you're not going to be very successful. Sure, you can catch fish doing just about anything, and you can fish a worm and reel it right straight in, and fish will chase it and hit it. But to be really successful, here's what you have to do. And I'll tell you how we changed our technique that day. We went back into some of the slower backwater where the fish tend to be, especially in the spring and summer, but I didn't know if they were still back in these bays, in these little fingers. And we got back and I said, okay, Russ, if we're going to be successful, we have to take each structure that we see. And in this case, most of the structures that looked the best were lily pads, single stalks especially. And I said, under each one of those pads, the pad acts like an umbrella. And underneath that umbrella, the fish can stay. It gives them cover. It protects them from the direct sunlight, and it gives them a place to sort of hide and wait for bait to go by. So if we find a way to slowly be able to present our bait so we can cast it right up to the lily pad, let it slowly fall down underneath there and not be moving on like you're usually fishing when you're using spinner baits. And so how do we do that? And I think today a lot of times people use other methods. They're using a trolling motor all the time. They're moving, drifting with the wind or whatever. But we took our little anchor in our canoe and would drop that anchor and give us a chance to fish the area around us really deliberately and slowly with those worms. And we had one of the best days of the year. Up to that point, we'd had a slow day. We'd caught some nice fish, but it'd been pretty slow. But once we slowed down and started fishing the lily pads with a Senko worm, we had fabulous luck. And each of us caught probably 7 or 8 nice 3 to 4 or 5 pound bass doing this. And so I couldn't wait to pass this on, because it's something I'd gotten away from. And we were using our worms Texas rigged, which means the hook point is basically buried in the worm, and we didn't have any weight. The worm itself is pretty dense with salt, and so it's weighty and it sinks down. You don't need, if you're fishing fairly shallow water that we were fishing, you don't need a weight, and you don't want anything. You don't want anything obstructing on that line and on your hook and the worm, so that as you cast it out into the weedy areas, it won't hang up. It's a lot easier to fish it if you don't have anything. We didn't have a wire leader, we didn't have a snap, anything, and we had the hook point covered, so there was nothing to catch except bass. And that's what we did. We caught some great bass. Until next time, folks, this is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report.